So in this lecture, we'll talk about Tibetan Buddhism as well as sunyata, or emptiness, and upaya, or expedient means. But we'll begin where we left off last time, with the hyperbolic bodhisattva vow. Take a look at this again. Each of its 4 points begins with an acceptance of the sheer impossibility of the tasks described and committed to. It's in this way a dedication with no end and no expectation of an end. Bodhisattvas are understood to be in it for the long haul, for forever. The Bodhisattva has accepted a perpetually deferred enlightenment out of compassion for those who have not yet reached the same level of spiritual awareness, out of a commitment and dedication to a universal realization of the sort described and exemplified by the Buddha. And I don't mean to suggest there's no hope, but the vow itself indicates the impossibility of the tasks. Bodhisattvas see the possibility of an impossible completion. They're not foolish. They take a vow that makes plain the impossibility. Besides being divine helpers, they are in this way a model to us more flawed and feeble humans. They see the good, the ultimate good, and they work toward it ceaselessly, beginning from a full awareness of how unlikely is complete success in the mission they've set themselves. But this is just it. This is the model. Success isn't measured here by completion. Life isn't like that. Completion in this frame is nirvana. It's being done with the whole mess. And these are the ones who have willingly deferred a completion that isn't realistically available to most of us, because success here, again, isn't completion. Success is that first step, the dedication to a task that is good, fortitude in the face of failure, a positive mental attitude, and active engagement despite the overwhelming evidence on the side of pessimism, an action that can be complete because it is self-serving, right? Before we move on, I want to introduce one bodhisattva whom we did not meet last time, but who's especially appropriate in the context of school. This is Manjushri, the bodhisattva of wisdom or awareness. He's the embodiment of prajna. Remember prajna, or wisdom. In his left hand, he holds a lotus upon which sits a book or a scroll. That book is one of the several texts known collectively as the Prajna Paramita Sutras, or the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. Now, in his right hand, Manjushri holds a flaming sword, and with this sword, he cuts through ignorance. But with the same sword, he cuts through the pride that comes with knowledge, because he is the bodhisattva of wisdom, and wisdom must be knowledge without the attachment to things, the attachment of things like pride. And here once more we can see the Bodhisattva of Compassion, Avalokiteshvara, also known as Guanyin, Kannon, and in Tibet, Chenrezig. The Dalai Lama is himself understood, again, to be an incarnation, a living embodiment of Chenrezig, the Bodhisattva of Compassion, alive and walking upon this earth. We'll spend most of our lecture today talking about Tibetan Buddhism, or, more generally, Vajrayana Buddhism. And here we see that yana again, Vajrayana, as we did with Mahayana. Remember that yana means vehicle or raft. And recall the arrow story. That story was all about the relevance of metaphysical truth, about what's really real or most true, about what has ultimate ontological authority. The Buddha's point in that story was that, look, if you're suffering, what's most real is that suffering. What's most important is ending that suffering. Metaphysical truth is valuable in that context only insofar as it helps to end suffering. So a related story has to do with the raft. Someone asked the Buddha, he says, your teachings, are they true? Are they really real? And in keeping with the principle of anitya, or impermanence, remember that? It's one of the 3 marks of existence. The Buddha is constitutionally resistant to this sort of question. We've seen that Buddhist philosophy does spin out highly complex systems, numbered lists of metaphysical truths, but the Buddha himself, in a number of oft-repeated stories, the Buddha exhibits a resistance to this sort of metaphysical speculation. And so in answer to the question, is the Dharma really real? Is your teaching ultimately true? The Buddha answers, look, it's a raft. There's a river. That river is samsara. It flows and it changes, and it is very compelling. What you want is to cross the river of samsara to get to nirvana. And I've given you a raft, a vehicle, a yana. Use it. Cross the river. But when you get to the other side of the river, what do you do with the raft? You put it down, right? You let it go. You don't carry it around with you. You don't attach yourself to it. That's not the point. So that's the metaphor. The teachings are a raft or a vehicle, and when the Mahayana came along, they had bodhisattvas, and they acknowledged an increased spiritual role for the laity, and they understood themselves as the greater vehicle. Remember, that's what Mahayana means, greater vehicle, the bigger raft, the one that could carry more people to the other side of the river or to nirvana. And everyone else, again, there were many groups, but the only one that survives is the Theravada. The Mahayana referred to all those other groups as Hinayana, or the lesser raft, the little vehicle. Nobody calls themselves Hinayana. It's a name applied by others, and it's not particularly nice. And so now we want to turn to the next yana, the next vehicle, the Vajrayana. The name means diamond vehicle or lightning vehicle. Vajra is a thing that is diamond hard, it is indestructible. The vehicle is understood to be fast and powerful. It's the fastest route, but also the most dangerous. It cuts through false views quickly and effectively. According to the Vajrayana, you can attain liberation in one lifetime if you're prepared to accept the risk involved in Vajrayana practices. Some see the Vajrayana as an offshoot of the Mahayana, and some see it as its own separate vehicle. I've got this image, right? This is the wheel of the Dharma, a little off, right? And you've got, on the one hand, you've got your Theravada, right? Theravada. And on the other hand, you've got your you've got this thing that you can interpret in different ways. There's the Mahayana, and there's the Vajrayana. Are they the same branch? Are they different branches? Did the Vajrayana branch off of the Mahayana, or is it its own thing? This is something that people don't agree on. But it is a style of Buddhism that developed in the north, in the Himalayan region, and remains strongest in Tibet, Bhutan, Nepal. It combines aspects of a number of traditions, and it basically corresponds to what is popularly known as Tibetan Buddhism, except, of course, that it is practiced and has grown also outside of Tibet. And Tibet, self-understood as a national as well as a religious reality, has developed its own particular practices, especially in terms of social organization, leadership, cultural expression. Buddhism was relatively late in coming to Tibet. It was about the 7th century CE when it started, and it received its Buddhism Tibet received its Buddhism from both the East and the West, from both India and China. The Indian influence ended up being the dominant influence. Now, at first, Buddhism didn't really stick in Tibet. It came from India with a large and vibrant pantheon. And the demonophobia, the fear of demons that was present in the Himalayan region, was just too strong to accept that sort of thing off the bat. So it sort of fizzled. And it took a couple hundred more years and a couple of diplomatic marriages to really set the stage. So in the second wave, the crucial moment came with the arrival of a cultural translator, Padmasambhava. He was born from a lotus blossom and mystically charged with an awareness of non-duality. He merged Buddhism with the indigenous shamanistic practices of the area known as Bon, and established a uniquely Tibetan Buddhist school from which others have developed. We don't have time here to talk about the different schools of Tibetan Buddhism, but again, take a class with Steve Jenkins and you'll get ample time to talk about it. In general, Vajrayana Buddhism employs the tantric methods of mantra, which are sacred sounds. We'll see a couple of those in the next lectures. Visualization of bodhisattvas and of lamas especially, and taboo-breaking practices, such as drinking wine, eating meat, and having sex. It's this last part that's been most tantalizing for the West. And, now you search Tantra online, and most of what you find isn't particularly Buddhist. It has more to do with sex. But the point of tantric teachings, which present themselves as secret teachings coming straight from the Buddha and passed down directly, is that the reasoned knowledge of the school distilled into books is not the most direct path to awakening. Rather, one comes face to face with the elemental forces in the world and then transcends the desires aroused by those forces. This is the doctrine that passion can be exhausted by passion, that the craving for food, drink, and sex can best be overcome by rising above it while it is being satisfied. And the point here is not desire, but it's transformation and eradication, that by which the world is bound by the same energy its bounds will be released. It's easy enough to be celibate if you're alone on a desert island, right? You're not overcoming desire because you're not facing it, right? But try being celibate while on tour with the Rolling Stones, or at spring break in Miami Beach. If you can be celibate there, that means you've truly overcome this desire. So one key to Tibetan Buddhism and to the Vajrayana more generally is sunyata, or emptiness, especially as it's articulated through Nagarjuna and the Madhyamaka school. To get at this, we'll take a step back. There's a distinction made in some of the earliest Buddhist texts, the distinction between conventional truth, like selves exist. Conventionally, my name is Sarah, and I am different from you, who have a different name or maybe the same. Sarah's pretty common, but anyway, I'm on my own thing. That's conventional truth and ultimate truth, such as anatman, or no self. Ultimately, there's no self. Conventionally, there is. Now, even this way of formulating the nature of reality is ultimately empty. Our minds have an inbuilt tendency to formulate views, to conceptualize. Perfect wisdom is what sees through the mind's conceptual constructions and is therefore not tainted by attachment to any views or opinions, you know. But wait, you might say. So this is a funny one, right? This is a Buddhist auto repair. It's a cartoon. My car is ready, says the customer. There is no car, says, ultimately things are empty, right? Conventionally, you have a car and you want it back. Ultimately, no car, right? And you say, wait, not attached to any views? Aren't we supposed to have right views? Isn't that one step on the Eightfold Path? Right. But prajnaparamita, or perfect wisdom, sees that the Four Noble Truths, nirvana, insight, meditation, all of it, all empty, all sunya. They're concepts, products of the mind's tendencies, arbitrary objects created by ultimately unreal proclivities. So according to the Large Sutra, there is no ignorance and no cessation of ignorance, no suffering and no knowledge of suffering, no cause and no abandoning the cause, no cessation and no realization of cessation, no path and no development of the path. So this teaching on emptiness applies to all teachings. It applies even to itself. This understands itself as the perfection of wisdom, of the original wisdom taught by the Buddha, the wisdom of how the world is seen by the awakened mind. It doesn't see itself as an innovation, this teaching. It sees rather that wisdom, once gained, itself hinders, that knowledge is like quick-drying cement, right? It hardens, and it holds the mind that has it. It makes the mind rigid so that reality becomes less an experiential field that we approach, and interactive and mutually enriching and always changing, but that the phenomenal world instead begins to enter an awareness that already has preformed categories, and that the categories themselves allow the mind to believe that there are things that fit into them, right? That my categories allow me to think, oh, I understand this world. That fits in this box, that fits in this box. But the mind's categories are just that. They are categories of the mind. In reality, all things are empty when considered as independently existent. The great hero of emptiness is Nagarjuna, again from the 2nd century CE. His outlook, his school, came to be known as the Madhyamaka, or middle school. The middle way was, for Nagarjuna, between eternalism and nihilism, between thinking that things and selves really exist, predictably, dependably, and thinking that nothing exists, right? That all is empty of being or significance. His middle way was dependent co-arising, a kind of radical, active interdependence. No thing is sufficient to explain its own existence. All things come to be together with other things. And because of that, you can't sort of put a box around one thing and say, oh, I know what that is. It's stable. Because it's constantly being impacted and self-defining based on what surrounds it, which is also changing. Everything is empty of its own inherent existence. Emptiness is dangerous, though, and Nagarjuna recognized this. He said it's like a snake if it's grasped by a fool, right? The key is this. It's not that nothing exists, but that nothing exists independently, possessed of its own inherent existence, not even the Dharma. All things interpenetrate, and so it follows that samsara equals nirvana. And Nagarjuna wasn't shy about asserting this. It all depends on the difference between conventional and ultimate truth, and that difference matters because until you can stick your hand in a fire and not be burned, conventional truth is going to matter to you, right? But what Nagarjuna points to is that this realization of nirvana has less to do with crossing a river and getting to a separate, different place, and it has more to do with a perspectival shift, with realigning your mind, your awareness, right? Now, I just want to show you a couple images of the sand mandalas that are particularly Tibetan expression of emptiness manifested. Here are monks constructing a sand mandala. They've got it sort of mapped out. Here's a close-up of the careful lying down of the sand with this tool that kind of scrapes, almost grain by grain sand onto the image. And here's a completed sand mandala. These are meant to be images of the universe, of the cosmos, the complete human experience in this oh-so-very transient world. And here, we see what happens after the painstaking laying out of the sand. It's swept away in a ritual recognition of this transience. Okay, so next time we will look at Zen Buddhism, Chan, Zen, the meditative schools of Buddhism.